Year 12, this is feedback on the January mock exam. So what I've done is I've taken some example answers to show you essentially what we're looking for. Now, I've not tried to pick perfect answers for each question. Hopefully there will be areas of improvement that we can talk about. Because in doing so, when we talk about how answers can be improved, what we're doing is we're all taking part in that process of reflecting upon these answers. So, saying that, the first answer I'm going to give you to look at is one that received 9 out of 9, and it was 3 criticisms of UK democracy. And if you remember, the structure that we're looking for is point, knowledge, analysis. And you can see down the left margin, P, AO1, AO2. P for point, AO1 is the knowledge, AO2 is the analysis. And you can see that the structure of this answer is consistent all the way through. Now, what's important in this question, 3 criticisms of democracy in the UK, is to make sure that it doesn't become an elections answer and it's not 3 criticisms of first past the post. First past the post can be a criticism of UK democracy, but the question is wider than that. So you can see that the first thing that's been mentioned here is referendums and misinformation, and then we've got the very famous example of the Brexit bus in 2016 and the pledge of £350 million a week, or the suggestion that that money could be spent on the NHS. And then the analysis, many feel as though they have been misled. They would have voted differently had they known this. So it's showing how the information not being accurate or being misleading, it has a negative impact on our democracy. The second one, lack of participation and turnout is the example. You can see that there, the low, 52%, 2001. Although I'm starting to think it might be 59%. Let's just check that figure. Yeah, I've just double checked the figure. That is 59%. So you can see there, that example, 59%. Turnout has increased to 67% in 2019. So we can see there we've got 2 examples that suggest that turnout has been low and is getting better in recent years, but it isn't as high as it was in the post-war period. This is an issue because when I see sentences like that, that tells me that you're going to go on and analyse because you're explaining what the knowledge shows, decreases the legitimacy of results, and that is a key feature of our democracy. So good analytical comment there. And then the final one, Parliament doesn't represent the wider population. So, for example, 29% of MPs are privately educated, which reflects only 7% of the wider population. And then there's an underrepresentation of minorities too. The example here is that's given is women. This suggests Parliament may not represent the whole of the UK very well. They might not make decisions in the best interests of the UK. So we've got that analytical comment again. So even despite the fact that I've sort of seen that inaccuracy with that example, clear structure, point, good knowledge, effective analysis, 9 marks out of 9. Okay, so question number 2. The analysis in this is really good. The knowledge could be more precise at times, and I'll go over how we can get into the top of level 3 with this answer. But this is on the advantages of first past the post. Now, you were asked a question earlier in the course on disadvantages. This one is slightly more difficult. So, let's have a look at our 3 advantages. Okay, so the first one, ability to deliver a majority government in most circumstances. The second one, simplicity. And the third one, this idea of fairness. We'll come to that in a moment. Okay, so this answer has got an understanding that other systems don't result in majority government. First past the post was done in 5 of the last 6 elections. It says there the exception being David Cameron's coalition. Now, it wasn't his coalition, it was a coalition of the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party. Also, as well, you've got to remember that 2017 to 19, it was a Conservative minority government. And so the knowledge could be better there in sort of an understanding of that election result, that the Conservatives relied upon the voting support of the Democratic Unionists between 2017 and 2019. The analytical comment is really good. It means government can easily pass laws, they have a majority, beneficial and an advantage. Secondly, clear point, simple system to use, and it says there AMS and STV can take time. First past the post is a simple system, and votes can be counted within hours. The quickest was Newcastle Central, 1 hour 27 minutes in 2019. So I think Newcastle Central is traditionally the first constituency to declare. That would be a good example, just to show a knowledge of an example of a constituency that gives a result before many political commentators have gone to bed on election night. The analysis, this is beneficial because it's efficient and there is less voter confusion. So you've got a good analytical comment there. And then this idea of fairness. It says every vote only counts as one, regardless who it is. In England, universal suffrage is applied. So here, this idea of people only vote once. I think you could also mention that constituencies are generally the same size, roughly 80,000 people in each of them. And when it says universal suffrage, it's most, with some exceptions, it's everyone over the age of 18. And then comes the good analysis again. This means that everyone except for prisoners, there are others, but I suppose we've got an idea here of the type of exception, has the right to vote and how their country is run. This is democratic and an advantage of first past the post. So 3 out of 3 marks for analysis. I think in every single paragraph, there are ways that we can make that knowledge more precise and more accurate to get the knowledge up from 4 marks out of 6 to 6 marks out of 6. Okay, the third question, and this is one that people struggled with the most. The reasons why the government might hold a referendum. In your referendums booklet, certainly the one that my class received, there is a table which explains the different circumstances that a government might hold a referendum. This answer was really good. The knowledge is excellent. There's 1 mark lost towards the end for analysis that's easily picked up, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so the first one talks about party growth, but for me, I would talk about political pressure, because the example that's given is the Scottish National Party and the growing calls for independence, which led to the 2014 referendum, turnout of 84%. The example's excellent. The point for me is this idea of political pressure. This shows that the growth of a party can force the government to call a referendum, and high turnout highlights they were right to do so because it was an issue people cared about. Another thing that you could say is, because this is a regional issue, Scottish independence, a referendum is a good way of gauging political opinion in a particular region of the UK. Whereas, we think of when we think of referendums, we think of Brexit as a national referendum, but actually that's the exception to the rule, because most referendums are actually local or regional issues. Second one, it says party pressure, and I'm assuming in this case that it means internal party pressure or party division, because it talks about Brexit and the role that Eurosceptics played in persuading David Cameron to call for a referendum in the 2015 Conservative manifesto. Then it says this shows referendums can be held in an attempt to settle political disputes. You can see there it says to settle political disputes. I'd argue it was an attempt to settle those disputes, that you could argue whether or not that was successful or not. And then finally, the third paragraph. One reason why a referendum might be held, divisions within a coalition government. And then it gives the example of the AV referendum, because it was... It says there it was decided by the coalition government. It was promised in the Liberal Democrats manifesto. So be careful when we're using the word manifesto in an answer like this, because no manifesto was fully implemented in the coalition government. They came up with an agreement, a coalition agreement. And then in the analysis, this shows referendums can be called to ask the public what policies they do and do not want to implement. I think for me, for a better analytical comment, is this idea of lacking a clear mandate. Because there is no manifesto to implement, because a coalition agreement has been agreed after the election, a coalition government can't claim to have the same responsibility to enact policies in the same way that a majority government would. And so a referendum can be used to give a mandate to the government and give them an idea of the public's opinion on the matter. Okay, everyone, let's move on now to the 25 mark questions. What I'm not going to do with this is go through it line by line. I don't think that is going to be much use to anyone at this point. What I want to do is have a look at style and how to approach these 25 markers. This received full marks, 25 out of 25, which doesn't happen often. So if you're looking at your essay, I don't want you to think that full marks is the target every time you write an essay. I think what we're looking for is getting into top level 4, level 5. That's where I want us to be aiming, because it's not often that 25 marks is awarded. I thought this was the tougher of the two questions. If it was me looking at a choice between select committees and constitution, I think constitution's an easier question to access. There was a few of us that did have a go at the select committee question. The key thing for me is that phrase, increasingly important. Remember that we've only got 5 marks for knowledge, 10 for analysis, 10 for evaluation. Now, generally in this answer, the knowledge is excellent. There's one example on page 1 where we're talking about the work of select committees, and Priti Patel was questioned about the Rwanda migrant scheme. What I would ask for there is which committee and when is this happening? Because, of course, at the time of recording this, we've now got Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. So I would look for a little bit more detail there, but by and large, right the way through the answer, the knowledge is excellent. And remember that knowledge isn't just examples, it's your base knowledge of what a select committee is and what it does. In the introduction, I'm looking for a definition, an outline of the debate, and finally, a judgment at the end of it. And you can see there at the end of the introduction, it says, I agree with the statement, select committees have had a great influence in British politics. So we've got some judgment from the very beginning. Now you can see that this is just over 3 pages, which is doable, but it's a longer essay. I think most people writing slightly less than that, but obviously things like handwriting size impact how much you write. But the key thing for me, if we look, is we've got 3 main points. The first one starts on page 1, which is the work that select committees do shadowing government departments and how scrutiny takes place that way. And then the second one there is the ability of select committees to advise appointments in terms of ministers or other government roles. And then there's some good knowledge later on in the answer of that work. And then, of course, we've got the analysis explaining why this suggests select committees are or are not becoming more important. And then finally, judgment at the end of it. And then the key counter-argument is the lack of power that the Lords select committees have. So, and that's really good. I imagine that most students, when given a question like this, would only really consider the work of Commons committees. So we've got the idea that of the work that's going on across Parliament and a wider breadth of knowledge, which is really good. And then finally, in the conclusion, it's consistent with the debate that has preceded it, which is really important. And it's reasoned. It's not just in conclusion, I agree, because they're becoming more important. There is a reason as to why that judgment has been reached. So a really strong answer here on the difficult question on select committees. And the second answer, the codified constitution, this was one that I would have gone for. I think it's a more accessible question. And I think the key issue with the question is it's now time for a codified constitution. For me, the assumption is that there is a growing mood that Britain should have one. And so that's what I would challenge. Is there a popular mood for a codified constitution or not? This answer was level 5, just like the one we've looked at previously. You can see 22 out of 25, so we've got a strong level 5 answer. 5 out of 5 for knowledge, almost full marks when it comes to analysis. Through the AO3, I think what we need to see is consistent judgment in the answer. So you can see in point number 1, I've written, when you present a counter-argument, can you reassert your judgment? So here we've got this idea of the Constitution, and then the counter-argument is talking about
it talks about minority groups and public overall. It could be argued an uncodified constitution allows for rights legislation to be introduced without a complex procedure. So the point here is that an uncodified constitution means that rights can be updated. And remember that works both ways. If you look at the current proposal to replace the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights, many people are protesting that's actually going to weaken the rights of British citizens. So for me, what I want to see is a reassertion of that judgment at the end of the first point. And then again in the third point, you can see my comment there that says link to judgment now for AO3 marks. So again, what I'm looking for in these paragraphs is your point, evidence, analysis, and in your analysis you're explaining what your evidence is trying to show, trying to prove. Then in your evaluation for AO3, you might be introducing a counter-argument to weaken what's been said or reasserting your judgment. And I want to see that happening throughout the answer. Just like in the last answer, a strong conclusion too, whereby you're not just telling me what your judgment is once more, you're providing clear reasoning for it.